I just don't. I'm happy.
It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Greetings from bloody old England. Greetings from the mother country. Welcome to a very special edition of Rico Brogna. I am in London. I am taping this, recording this, doing this live at 10 o'clock local time, which is very surreal. The 5-hour time difference is significant. Like, we're used to the 3 hours when you go west. You know, we're starting things later. But here, when you go to London, it's the complete opposite. So it is late at night. The New York Mets did get a split against the Philadelphia Phillies. 2 wonderful days at London Stadium in England. I got to tell you, the stadium was I don't want to call it a dump. That's not nice. You know what it was? It was almost like you went back into a time machine and went to a stadium from the early 90s or the late 80s, because London Stadium is obviously not a baseball stadium. It's a soccer stadium, but it's a cookie cutter. You know, it reminds me of the old Busch Stadium or the old Three River Stadium or the old Riverfront Stadium. Like, it's completely circular around. They're playing on carpet, even if it isn't as noticeable as the carpet we saw in the late 80s and early 90s. So it was not exactly the beautiful stadiums that we are used to. But nevertheless, there were 2 baseball games between the New York Mets and the Philadelphia Phillies. And as ugly, and it was ugly, and as lucky, and yes, we Met fans were very lucky, the Mets somehow, despite all of the ugliness and the luckiness, got a split against arguably the best team in baseball. That doesn't mean I'm inspired as I come home from London. It means I'm relieved as I come home from London, because getting swept and falling 10 games under 500 and losing the way they appear to be losing on Sunday would have been just the same old from the garbage we've watched all year long. So the fact they were able to come back in the 9th inning, almost blow it in the bottom of the 9th inning, and then win the game on the most unlikeliest, weirdest, oddest double play in the world, like, you take it and you run. So I'm not drawing any we're back conclusions. Obviously, this team's got a long way to go to get back into, like, real contention, and that's being a 500 team. But to somehow survive this game, I'm stunned by it. And I think anybody watching this game, anybody that made the trip, and there were plenty of Met fans that did, we'll get to that as the pod rolls on. I think when Bryce Harper came to the plate after Reed Garrett was pulled for Drew Smith, there's not one of us who didn't think Bryce Harper was hitting a game-winning 3-run home run. Like, we all thought the same thing. And, of course, he rips a base hit, and it's almost like, well, lucky that it was only a base hit. And then the Alec Boehm walk, and then when Nick Castellanos comes up down by a run, I think we all just envisioned it was going to end in some kind of horrible way, like every bad loss has this season. And maybe, hopefully, probably not, that's a sign of things turning, because they won the game in a very miraculous way. As Castellanos hit that baseball about 2 feet in front of the catcher, Luis Torrens, I'm screaming, just get him at home. That's my thought. Like, I still have those visions of Joey Wendell from last month when I'm sitting there at Citi Field, I'm screaming, throw home, cut off that tying run. And we all know Joey did, and he tried to turn a double play. It didn't work out. So when that ball is a few feet in front of the catcher, I'm just screaming, get the out. And honestly, I wasn't even thinking about a double play. I wasn't even thinking it was a possibility. But look, to Torrens' credit, he touches home. He then makes the throw. Now I'm watching the throw being made, and I have visions of it going up the first base line. It looked low from where I was sitting in the upper deck. And Pete was able to make the play. The Mets were incredibly excited. And I think my wife would tell you, I don't even know if I was excited. I was more just stunned. Like, it was a stunning conclusion to a game, because I think we're just so used to these horrible defeats. And everything about this felt like it was going to be another horrible defeat. From the fact that the offense did nothing over the first 5 innings against Taijuan Walker, to the fact that Jose Quintana again gave you just another crappy performance where he just lost it all in the 4th inning. Like, he wasn't great in the first few innings of this game, but to his credit, he got through that first inning when he put the first 3 guys on base, and he's facing a bases loaded, nobody out jam. But Quintana craps the bed. The Met offense does nothing against Taijuan Walker. They come back, they fight back, they tie the game. And then we see that home run that Deadneil Nunez gives up to David Dahl. And by the way, there's a lot of first guessing second guessing, however you want to describe it, I have for Mendy from this game. And that sequence is one of them. So obviously, just to get the beginning of the game out of the way, Quintana sucks. I'm not pulling him out of the rotation, quite frankly, because he's got the resume where if he could just string together a couple of good starts in a row, I would trade his ass no matter where the Mets are in the standings. Like, that's one thing that I think we'll discuss a lot more as we get closer to the trade deadline. Whether you think they're in a race or not, there are certain guys on this team that you can trade either way, where you don't have to overanalyze if they're a game out or 5 games out or 6 games under 500, because the Mets, believe it or not, it's stunning to even think about this, have a depth of starting pitching. Like, I don't want to say it's the strength of their team. It's not, but they have a lot of options. Jose Budo deserves to be in the rotation. Christian Scott deserves to come back into the rotation. Like, they've got options. So with Quintana, I'm viewing him as, you know what, just put together 3 or 4 good starts in a row. Teams know what you're capable of doing. They remember what you did in the second half of last year. They certainly remember what you did in the second half of the year before that with the St. Louis Cardinals. It's frustrating with Quintana that he's been a Met for 2 halves. The first half of last year, he killed the Mets by not being healthy. Let's be honest. If Jose Quintana was healthy and solid, the Mets season may go completely differently. He pitches well in the second half, but it feels like it's too little too late. Like, great, you pitched well, not your fault necessarily, but it didn't matter. And now in the first half, I mean, when you look at the guys in the rotation right now, and certainly with McGill and Peterson, we don't have enough sample size. I acknowledge that. But if you look at all the starters in this rotation outside of Adrian Hauser, nobody's been consistently worse than Jose Quintana. That's just the reality of it. So he gives you just another absolutely crappy start. Again, I give him credit for getting through the first inning when he loads the bases up, got the big double play against Alec Boehm, got another big double play against Whit Merrifield in the second inning, got through the third inning. But the fourth, I mean, you got to get through the fourth inning, bro. That's a non-competitive outing when you're knocked out with 2 outs in the fourth inning. And now you're forcing, again, Carlos Mendoza to go to the Met bullpen early. Like we saw it the day before. We'll get into game 1 with Sean Manaea, in which he can't get through the fourth inning. Like, I know the Mets have had a bunch of off days, but it's ridiculous how these guys cannot consistently give you innings. Meanwhile, the Yankees starting pitchers basically go 5 or 6 innings on some kind of historic pace, essentially. But anyhow, Quintana gets beat up a little bit, gets knocked out in the fourth inning. Credit to Danny Young, because he did come in and was able to get the big strikeout of JT Realmuto. A 3-0 game could be worse. And look, the Met offense showed you a little bit of something, tiny bit of something. Luis Torrens starts the rally with a base hit. Pete Alonso draws a walk. Brandon Nimmo ripped that double to left field. And then you get a huge hit from J.D. Martinez. So the offense is at least able to fight back and give you something. But here's where I was confused by Carlos Mendoza. And I want to acknowledge that when you don't have a great bullpen, which the Mets don't have, when you don't have starters that can go deep into games, which the Mets don't have, it makes managing very difficult. So I acknowledge that. I'm not going to pick on every time the Met bullpen gives up a run and say it's Carlos Mendoza's fault. I'm just going to give you specific things that, like, to me, didn't make a lot of sense. So he takes Danny Young out, top of the order in the fourth inning. No problem with that. You could have argued he should have taken Quintana out 1 batter earlier, especially when DJ Stewart made that great catch in right field in the fourth inning. But, okay, you're trying to get somehow Quintana to get you through the fourth inning. And you figure against Johan Rojas, he can get him out. He can't. So don't really have an issue with when he took Quintana out. He goes to Danny Young, fine. Okay. Has him face 2 of 3 lefties and Kyle Schwarber and Bryce Harper. I got no issue with that. He goes to Dedniel Nunez. Here's where I was a little confused. There's 2 things, but let's start with this. He goes to Nunez. He gets through the 5th inning, helped out by a great play by Torrens. Remember, he picked off Alec Boehm at first base. Play got overruled. He pitches a 1-2-3 6th inning. All right, you've already now gotten 5 outs out of Dedniel Nunez. And now you see Rob Thompson go lefty to start the 7th inning. Goes to David Dahl. You got Dahl, you got Schwarber, you got Realmuto, and then you got Bryce Harper. And you have Jake Diekman warming up in the bullpen. The Phillies have just announced we're going to a left-handed bat. Jake Diekman's warming up. He's obviously warming up to face the left-hand hitters. Why not go to Diekman right there to start the 7th inning? Like, once David Dahl is announced and he's in the game, go out, make that change. They haven't changed that rule in baseball yet. unless they have, and like my brain is fried. Like, go out there. He's already gotten 5 outs. Go use your lefty. And I thought about it. Look, I didn't think David Dahl was going to hit a home run. I'm not telling you that I did, but I see who's coming up in the order. I can see out in right field who's warming up in the bullpen. It's Jake Diekman. Why not use him? So that's part one of where I disagreed with. Now, Diekman comes in. He mostly gets the job done, gets the 2 outs, gives up the issues the walk to Bryce Harper. Now you go to Reed Garrett. Again, I'm on the same page with Mindy. Got no problem with these moves. He walks Alec Bohm, strikes out Castellanos, pitches a great 8th inning. At that point, it is now the 9th inning. The Mets rally in the 9th, as we saw, and it was kind of the weakest 9th inning rally you'll ever see. Like, outside of Jeff McNeil, give Jeff McNeil credit. Outside of Jeff McNeil, that was some weak cheese, man. Luckily you get Mark Vientos hitting the little ground ball to third base, which this time isn't turned into some kind of highlight reel play. But Bohm can't make the play, and the Mets tie the game up. They obviously take the lead on Pete Alonso being hit by a pitch after Francisco Lindor strikes out. They score another run on a pass ball. It was 3 of the weakest runs you'll ever see. Now, I'll take them. I'm not complaining, but we need to acknowledge that, and I do. So they get the 3 runs. Why are we asking Reed Garrett, who has already gotten 4 outs, why are we asking him to pitch the 9th inning? Like, you want to give Sean Reed Foley a clean 9th inning? Fine. You want to give Drew Smith a clean 9th inning? Fine. If you want to go back to Adam Ottavino and give him a clean 9th inning, fine. But what I didn't love was having Reed Garrett start the 9th inning because, believe it or not, and I understand all those guys are not great options. That's why, look, I know he's not dealing with, the nasty boys in the 90s in his bullpen. But to me, I've already gotten 4 outs out of Reed Garrett. I feel like I have a better chance to get those last 3 outs with any of those pitchers having a clean inning, more so than asking for 3 more outs out of Reed Garrett. And then he gives up the base hit to Christian Pache, of all people, and you keep him in the game? Like, isn't that your sign of, okay, this is probably not going to work. I'm going to take him out. Now, he got Schwarber out, stunningly enough, and then he hits Realmuto on an 0-2 pitch, which cannot happen. And then finally, he goes to Drew Smith. And look, the Drew Smith adventure was an adventure. The base hit to Bryce Harper. He's freaking walking Alec Bohm. And then he gets, the most fortunate double play in the history of baseball, the 2-3 Torrens to Alonso double play, in which Garrett Stubbs came in very hard behind the plate. So those were the 2 bullpen management issues I had, if any, with Carlos Mendoza. The keeping Reed Garrett out to pitch the 9th inning, and then if you've got Diekman warming up, why not use him earlier? With that said, they won the freaking game. It was not the most inspiring win. It didn't have like this defining moment. Like, if, we're thinking back to the UK series and we're like, oh yeah, remember the Mets won that dramatic second game? I think the only play that you're going to remember is the double play. Like, you'll remember the 2-3 double play that somehow Luis Torrens turned. And look, Luis Torrens has made the decision difficult on what the Mets are going to do with the backup catcher. We saw him start both of these games. We've seen him hit a little bit, even though I did prefer early in the game that he would try to lay down a bunt. Or was that yesterday? No, that was in the 7th inning when he came up with 1 and nobody out in the 7th inning of the game, in which the game was tied. I was screaming, like, can you bunt? And by the way, I wasn't screaming. I was talking to myself because I wasn't screaming at the stadium. I was just like, bunt. Why isn't he bunting? If Tomas Nido was up here, he'd be bunting. But they got a decision to make with backup catcher with Francisco Alvarez coming back. Look, Torrens has played well. We know how well Tomas Nido has played. So both of those guys, shockingly enough, it's funny to think about the backup catcher with Omar Narvaez gone. Both guys have played reasonably well. But they win this game and a major sigh of relief, especially after the garbage we saw in the first game. The first game was it was a stinker. They score early against Ranger Suarez, and that was great. But what I cannot get out of my head from game 1 was in that 4th inning where the Phillies scored basically all their runs. They scored the 6 runs in the 4th inning, and Chase Sharmaniah. It's not the Bryce Harper home run. It's not that. It's the fly ball to right field by Edmundo Sosa that Starling Marte has to catch. It is a 1-1 game. It is a fly ball to right field. And I say this before any of the analytics came out that there's a 95% catch rate. I'm sitting there with a buddy I made. I made a friend. I made a gentleman friend from the United Kingdom, a British man who is a diehard Philadelphia Phillies fan. And we talked about, like, how did this happen? Sir, how did you become a diehard Philadelphia Phillies fan? And this is a true story. I'll get into more detail on the show with Tiki on Monday. But he loved NHL, I think 95, like the video game. So he got NHL 95, the video game, while growing up in some part of England I had never heard of. And he fell in love with hockey. And he fell in love specifically with the Philadelphia Flyers. And then he tells me that his town he's from reminds him of Philly, blue collar, douchey. I'm just kidding. I added that. Obnoxious fans. No, he just had a bond with the city of Philadelphia and then said, I'm going to become a fan of all the Philadelphia teams, and fell in love with the game of baseball. So here's this guy, like a real breathing Phillies fan who's British from the United Kingdom. Like, there were actually a few of those, believe it or not. And the one thing we bonded on was destroying Starling Marte for not catching that fly ball in right field, because it pissed me off. And look, does Sean Manaea have to give up a home run to Whit Merrifield right after? He does not. He don't have to do that. Does he have to give up a double to Christian Pache? He does not. He don't have to do that. He doesn't have to then give up an RBI single to Kyle Schwarber. He does not. So Sean Manaea did not have to turn that into the absolute ridiculous awfulness that was the top of the fourth inning. But if Starling Marte can catch a fly ball to right field, it is a different game. Now, granted, the Mets couldn't hit. Ranger Suarez is a tough customer. When you think about it, 5 2/3 innings, 2 runs against Suarez is probably like a good offensive performance. But look, they had opportunities against him. And I think that was what was so kind of frustrating. Like, even in the first inning, it looked like they were going to spoil the leadoff double by Francisco Lindor. They had guys on base in the third inning. They had guys on base in the fourth inning, and Terren struck out. They had a great opportunity in the fifth inning where they had second and third, nobody out. They only scored 1 run. And to me, that was the biggest part of the game, because you're in a 6-1 game and you have second and third, nobody out. You get a base hit at 6-3. Like, okay, you have yourself a baseball game. And they just could not get the big hit. They had a rally in the sixth inning. They had 2 on and 2 out. Lindor struck out. They obviously had that ill-fated rally in the ninth inning with the bases loaded and JD ground out. So it wasn't just Sean Manaea, though it was Sean Manaea. And look, Starling Marte did well offensively, had 2 hits in this game, but his defense it's a problem. I mean, that's a problem. That cost them, like, I don't want to say it cost them 5 runs, because again, Sean Manaea is allowed to get outs and get through the inning. But that kind of defense can't happen. The Mets are not a good enough team to give outs away. They're just not. And they did that in game 1 of this series. So game 1 was it was ugly. It was typical Mets. It was disgusting. Now, as far as the crowds are concerned, I'll ask you, Pete, you're watching these games on television. Obviously, Fox had the first game. ESPN had the second game. What did it sound like on TV?
It sounded like it was more Phillies fans. I know that there was a one point in time they were trying to do like a "Let's Go Mets" chant, and it sounded like all of a sudden like boos just started to rain in. So it did feel, it looked pretty, not, I wouldn't say even, but it looked like there was a lot of Mets fans there, just not as many as Phillies.
No question. I think that's very accurate. I would say that the breakdown was probably 65-35 Phillies, so they definitely had the edge. I don't think it was 80-20, which I've heard some people suggest. Like, being in the building, there were definitely Met fans. I think what was really interesting is that, yeah, you had the people who flew in. And I met plenty of listeners to the Rico and listeners to the station. It was great meeting everybody out here. So there were definitely, like, New Yorkers came out. There were definitely Philadelphians who came out. But I got to tell you, man, the vast majority of the people in that building were British people that like baseball. And some were Met fans, genuinely, like, hey, I like the Mets. Why they picked the Mets, I have no idea. Genuinely like the Phillies, totally get why. Phillies have had success the last few years. And then you saw a lot of jerseys from every other team. Like, you saw Yankee jerseys, you saw Blue Jay jerseys. I mean, every team you could imagine. Tampa Bay Devil Ray jerseys. Yes, Devil Ray, not even Rays. So it was almost like a baseball festival at times with the people that were there.
All right, I have a couple questions for you. Because you're saying all these new jerseys, you've seen all this stuff. Did you see anybody actually wearing the Phillies Mets jersey or shirt that was out there?
I saw one person. I saw one person. I don't know what they were doing. I don't know what they were doing. Maybe they just thought, maybe it was somebody just saying, hey, I want to experience baseball. I guess the equivalent would be if there was a big soccer match at MetLife Stadium, and I don't have a rooting interest. I don't know much about soccer, but I was open-minded enough to say I want to go. And I had the shirt of two rivals on. Like, it would probably make Tiki go nuts and soccer fans go nuts. So I think in that case, it's probably an ignorance. But, dude, there were a lot of, like, British baseball fans. I mean, they had 54,000 people there, and it wasn't fugazi, because if you go look at the prices and you look at the ticket prices, they were expensive. Like, they were more expensive than going to a game at Citizens Bank Park or going to a game at Citi Field. It wasn't playoff prices, but it was probably like the level between a regular season game and a playoff game. So for anyone who thinks, oh, the MLB probably just like gave tickets away, I'm sure they did to charities, but there was like expensive tickets that people were buying. And listening to the accents, most of the people there were British. Like, they didn't fill that stadium up with people flying in from Philadelphia and New York. No way.
That's awesome. Now, another question. You said there was a lot of British people there. Anybody else scoring games? And a follow-up, do they score right to left, or is it still left to right?
You're funny. You know what I found out about this whole left to right, right to left thing? And maybe I should have known this. Maybe this is my fault. All these other European countries, most of them, drive on the right side of the road. Like, the British are the odd ones. Like, so the only countries that generally drive on the left side of the road are countries that the British once controlled. So you're talking about like India. You know what I mean? You're talking about Australia. You're talking about countries like that. So we are not the odd ones. They're the odd ones. But no, I didn't see anybody scoring. They did sell a scorecard. I did see that. I think I was the only person scoring the game. But there was a good environment for these games. Like, the people were definitely into it. And I got to tell you, I know we're going to have a lot more further discussions on the state of this team, where they're going, our confidence, all that crap. I'm just thrilled they got a win. Like, when we sat here a week ago, kind of looking ahead at how the Mets can get back into this season, if you will, make a run. We know how bad the bottom of the National League is, but we also know, like, you got to get to 500. You're not making the playoffs in all likelihood with 77 wins. That's not a realistic thing. You don't want to say 81 wins, maybe, but 77 wins isn't happening. They needed to sweep the Washington Nationals, which they did. They needed to get a split against Philadelphia, which they did. And now, upon coming home, they got to sweep the Florida Marlins. And if they can sweep the Miami Marlins, and I know that's looking ahead and it's asking a lot, now all of a sudden you're cooking. Now you're 5 games under 500. You got a series with San Diego. And no matter how you win those games, because this game, the finale against the Phillies, like I said, ugly as crap. Like, very fortunate they won this game. But if you can put that together, and now you've got like a sustained run where you're playing good baseball. Like, if you do that, and I know maybe it's asking too much. I said that about the Marlins a few weeks ago. They went to Miami. They freaking lost 2 out of 3. Like, they were lucky to even get a win. But that's where at least I have some hope, because I think if they lose this game and we're just sitting there 10 games under 500, and it's like back to where we started, all hope would be lost. Now I'd say most hope is lost, but not all hope is lost. That's kind of the state of how I feel as I sit here late at night in London, England, very excited to get back on a plane and come back to the good old USA and be on the air Monday at 2:00, which is really 7:00 my time, because the whole thing is just, I can't get over this. The hours thing is messy. Now, I don't want to go too long, because I'm sure the audio quality is also not quite as good. But we do have a couple of voicemails. Let's definitely listen to them, react to them, and I'll definitely give you a more fuller Rico once we're back in the States. So let's listen to voicemail number 1.
Okay.
Hey, Kevin Desi from New Jersey here. I just want to talk about the whole back of the baseball card argument. I think it just criminally undervalues the present and the recent past and overvalues the distant past. For almost 2 years straight, we've been hearing from the likes of Billy Epler and David Stearns that we should just trust these players and their abilities and look at their track record. They have a strong history of performance. Look at their resumes. But at what point should we start to accept the present performance and the recent past performance? We've seen for a year and a half straight that the likes of, Jeff McNeil, Francisco Lindor, for example, have been consistently a shell of their former selves. And why should we have to sit here and take this excuse of just trust their past play, just look at their resume, instead of trusting the part of the resume that says over the indicative of future performance than the distant past. Especially because we've seen how.
You could take it. He just rambles.
No, I listen, I totally get it. And I think that what I need to do, and we all need to do, is retire the term back to the baseball card. We need to find a new way to say the same thing, because the same thing still holds value in that guys get off to bad starts. And you have to trust that more times than not, they remind you of who they are. I think every case is different. So Jeff McNeil, we'll use him as an example. And look, I was encouraged by Jeff McNeil. He took his 1 week benching. Basically, they were facing lefties every day, which had a lot to do with it. He comes back, he gets 2 hits. Okay, now I hope that turns into something. I hope that turns into a massive Jeff McNeil hot streak. I'm not expecting that because, to our voicemailer's point, I think the sample size of Jeff McNeil being bad is so big that supersedes the batting title from 2 years ago. And I think the back of the baseball card point doesn't work with a guy like McNeil when you have the sample size that we're looking at. Francisco Lindor it's tough. Like, his numbers right now are not good. Like, if you look at where he is, he's sitting at about 235. He's sitting with a 710 OPS. Like, no one would say those are good enough until the finale of the series where he took an 0 for 5. He was getting hot. Like, we were starting to see Francisco Lindor get real hot. So I think with a guy like him, I have more trust that he will be closer to resembling the player we expect than a guy with a 700 OPS who's hitting 230. Now, granted, it's the middle of June. Like, he's got a lot of work to do. And the frustrating thing about Lindor is it seems like he's about to get hot, like he has, and then you'll have an 0 for 5, like he had in the finale against Philadelphia. But I still think there's a value to looking at a player's track record and saying, hey, I think that's more indicative than the last few months. But I think it really comes down to the individual player. Jeff McNeil, though, we can all agree, has a lot to prove. Okay, he was clearly put on notice by this last week. And so he's got to hit. And so he'll get at-bats like we saw on Sunday against the Phillies, but he better perform. And the thing that's been made obvious is he's not guaranteed playing time every single day, which is the way it should be, which is what I said about a week and a half ago. I wouldn't DFA him, but I would definitely start treating him like he's a reserve. What's interesting with him, if I had to predict right now, win or lose, by the way, this has nothing to do with where they are in the standings, because I think sometimes you look at not just where you are in the standings, but overall what's best for the franchise moving forward. I said that about Jose Quintana. Like, either way, I think the Mets have the depth where if you trade Jose Quintana, you're not giving up on a season, especially if you can get good value. I think the Mets know it's over with Jeff McNeil. And so what I can see before the trade deadline, he's picking up a portion of his contract and getting back, a marginal prospect from an offensive hungry team like Seattle, who could certainly use a bat. I almost expect that. Like, if I had to bet right now, I would predict that Jeff McNeil is not on this team come August 1st. Even if he gets hot, by the way. I mean, if he gets hot, it's probably a good thing. Maybe it means you have to pick up a little bit less than what you would normally have to. Let's take a listen to voicemail number 2.
I just don't. I'm happy we won. Luis Torrens saves the day, but I don't understand Mendoza's whole process there, entering the ninth, bringing Reed Garrett, who's pitched an inning and 2/3. You have rested guys in the bullpen. I mean, he's lucky Torrens saved his rear end tonight, because I would have been calling for his job. I've been a big Mendy guy. I think Mendy's got some good qualities, but that was asinine is a compliment for how stupid that was. I don't even know how to even explain. I can't even begin to explain why you would do that. And I know he doesn't have great options in that bullpen, but you have to. You cannot run Reed Garrett out there, who has been great, by the way. His ERA is over 8 in his last 7 or 8 outings. I don't understand trying to stretch him. I don't get it. It's not like you got Mariano Rivera. It's Mariano Rivera. I mean, you've got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me. He's lucky. Mendoza's lucky. Torrens made a great play there at home to win the damn game, because that would have been to explain that. I would have loved to hear it. I'd still love to hear it in the post game. I'm sure he's going to be asked about it, but I just that is I'm flabbergasted. I don't know how to explain it.
I'm with you, man. I brought it up. Like, I did not like the idea of trying to get 2-3 more outs out of Reed Garrett. And then when he gives up the leadoff hit, you still keep him in the game. It's almost like doubling down on the mistake. So I completely agree. And I know it's easier when you don't have great bullpen options for us to criticize, but I think sometimes you got to use reason. By the way, one other thing to keep in mind moving forward, the Marlins are scheduled to start two lefties to begin that Marlin Mets series. It'll be very interesting coming off a 2-hit game from Jeff McNeil, how Mendoza treats Jeff McNeil. Is he in the lineup on Tuesday night against the lefty? Does he go back to Jose Iglesias, who's played well? Should be interesting. Like overall, I think McNeil will get to play because more times than not you face righties, but the Mets are on this weird stretch where they're just facing like a crap ton of lefties. So keep an eye on that moving forward as they get set to host the Marlins on Tuesday night.
Two quick things. A, did you see the slide after Torrens threw the ball? Was it late?
You know, I didn't see a replay of it, but I saw it because I was staring down at the plate on basically just touch home plate. Like that's all I cared about. Don't even throw to first base. And it did look like Garrett Stubbs came in late and hard, and he's a catcher, which is interesting to see a catcher who kind of knows what that's like to come in late and hard. It'd be crazy if Torrens threw it away, which I was scared of. Like, would the umpires, based on a bad throw and how hard he come in, would they have called interference and ended the game like that? But it definitely looked like he came in very hard on Torrens.
And how about the defensive play by Pete Alonso to prevent that ball from going past? I mean, everybody is just all over Pete Alonso's an average player, this, that, the other thing. I'm sorry, but the guy is just impressive every single week, and it's killing me.
Listen,
yeah, go.
My only knock on my boy Pete, he's got to hit. And he's not hitting enough. That's the problem. Like right now, Pete, I need to see more offensively out of Pete Alonso. And I did get hit by a pitch, yippity-doo-dah, that gave him the lead. But look, his defense has always been underrated. That's fine. You know, people think he's a schmuck at first base. They're wrong. They're not watching. That's okay. He's a fine base runner. Okay, he's not bad. He's not amazing. He's fine. He's not fast, but he's smart. He needs to hit. He needs to mash. And right now, I love the guy. He hasn't done enough mashing. He just hasn't. And he hasn't done enough mashing in big spots. They need Pete Alonso to get hot right now. I mean, the Mets are due for a couple of their guys, like Brandon Nimmo too, to get hot. Maybe Jeff McNeil based on the bench to get hot at the same time. And that will go a long ways. But anything else said about Pete, it's just the old fodder we always hear about him. He's got to hit. Like he needs to be that 40 home run, 100 RBI machine. We haven't seen it yet, but hey, it doesn't matter if you bury this team. That's fine. Like in my mind, I've sort of buried them too, right? Like we're all kind of down on them. They got a huge stretch of games coming up, and it's all right in front of them. The opportunity is right there. So I know it pisses Met fans off when Steve Cohen says he thinks the team can turn it around, or when Steve Cohen says, these fans have seen worse. First of all, Steve, let me give you advice. Don't say that. Don't tell us what we've seen, okay? We know what we've seen, and we can judge for ourselves if what we've seen is worse, the same, or whatever, okay? I don't need the owner saying, they've seen worse, okay? Just stop. But it's in front of them. Like the Mets being in a race, a legitimate race, is right there in front of them. Now, hopefully they take advantage of it. Hopefully they can take advantage of this homestand because the Mets have been such a freaking awful home team. I mean, 13-22 is ridiculous. That cannot happen. I don't care how crappy you are. You can't be 13-22 at home. And hopefully coming up this week, they could turn that around. That's the hope. Now, we will give you a full Rico with a nice microphone backstage coming up in a few days, but I definitely wanted to give you some reaction from London. Any thoughts, you can always email us, thericob@gmail.com. You can always leave us a voicemail, 725-222-8699. What a weekend. London's a nice place, but I can't wait to get home. More on that, 2 o'clock with Tiki on Monday afternoon. I'm coming off a plane. I'm driving right to work, and we'll be ready to go, talking about all sorts of things, not just the Mets. But we appreciate you listening, downloading, and subscribing to Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.